Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Roundtable Podcast for the Libertarian Party of Maine. I am your host, Jason Mataafa. I am the treasurer for the Libertarian Party of Maine and also the representative for Waldell County. And I am joined by our two resident guests. So I'll go ahead and let them give quick introductions. If Dane, you want to start off?
Yeah, Dane Courtois. I am the chair of the Libertarian Party of Maine, and I'm also the York County chair as well.
And that's St. Pierre. I produce the podcast.
He does more than that, but yes, he is our producer in chief. So welcome back, everybody. But we have a pretty full docket of things to go over because the world seems to never stop blowing up. So this will be fun. But we want to start with some local stuff before we move into some more national news, which is the stuff that I know we'll probably spend some more time on and things that people are really interested about. But we do want to call some attention to some things happening locally, not just in Maine, but in New England. So the big one that I want to start off with is talking about CT SB6. This is a Connecticut bill. It is their homeschooling bill. But before we dive into it, we do have a video, if Matt, you want to pull that up, and we'll start with that video first, and then we'll dive into a little bit more.
Lawmakers are pushing for stronger regulations when it comes to children getting pulled out of school. They say their goal is to keep children safe in the state. News 8's Kiara Smith is at the Capitol where a hearing took place.
Today, there was some pushback with this legislation, and families who plan to testify today did not get a chance to speak in person. State leaders, the Connecticut DCF commissioner, and several families filing into the state capitol this afternoon to voice their thoughts on a bill that would notify DCF when a child is withdrawn from school during an open case.
We want to keep children safe, first and foremost. At the same time, we want to balance the rights of parents to ensure that government isn't overstepping its bounds.
But parents are already opposed to part of the bill, sharing their concerns of privacy violations.
If you have parents that are withdrawing, they might be just moving to another city. They might have very legitimate reasons. Maybe they want to homeschool. Maybe they want to go to a private school. And those are things legally they should be able to freely do without coercion from the government or fear of being reported to DC unnecessarily, especially if they're innocent people.
Due to the weather conditions, the meeting was sent into recess after an hour, and parents in the room did not get to speak.
We care about our kids, we care about our freedoms, and when we're not able to speak, it's unfortunate.
Some state representatives, like Brian Lanou, were questioning the DCF commissioner to make sense of these plans.
I think it's important to the points that you're making that it not in and of itself create a new case or an obligation that DCF act in any different way in light of the notice. So it's really a notification, gets documented in the record. And that's the way it currently reads.
It's federal FERPA laws. That's the Privacy Act for parents, and that the State Department of Education commissioner said she will not comply if this bill is passed, Section 5, because it is a total violation of state statutes and, most importantly, constitutional rights.
The plans for increased safety regulations come after two shocking cases where children were pulled out of school in our state. Most recently, the horrific death of 11-year-old Jacqueline Mimi Torres Garcia. And last February, we learned of the case of a Waterbury man who told police he was held captive by his stepmother for 2 decades.
DCF is doing all these things. Why do we not know about them?
And in that meeting, state leaders were also calling on DCF to be more transparent moving forward. In Hartford, I'm Kiara Smith, News 8.
So just so I understand, this bill is if you take your children out of school, that the CPS or the DHS or whatever, they get notified that you did such a thing? Is that what this bill would do?
So currently the way it's set up in Connecticut is that if someone, let's say we're really progressive, Dana, we have a child, and we want to go ahead and pull that child out of public school, we have the right to go pull them. You don't have to give a reasoning, and we can go ahead and pull our child, and that's the end of it. With this bill, you would first have to document the reason why, and automatically it would trigger a notification to the Department of Child Care in the state of Connecticut. Not saying that it'll cause them to do an action, but they would automatically be informed, hey, Dana and Jason just took their kid out of public school. And then they have the right to follow up on that And furthermore, and this is part that they didn't talk about, but I was reading in the actual bill, that also gives Child Protective Services in Connecticut the right to deny the withdrawal of the child if they have an open case with Child Protective Services, or if Child Protective Services has reason to believe that that child should not be pulled, which is more opaque. So I get the idea of like, well, if me and you are beating our kid and want to pull the kid out of school, I get that. But the idea is that, okay, but what other things? Like, could they say, well, Dane has a lot of Second Amendment stuff hanging on his walls and has a bunch of ARs. Has a bunch of ARs and is a known anarchist, and we don't believe that's the best place for a child to be raised. So we think we need to keep that kid in the public school system for its own safety, his own safety, and we want to go down that slippery slope kind of thing.
Oh boy. Well, like Camus said, right? The welfare of people in particular is always going to be the alibi of the tyrants, right? I know I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but welfare of the people will always be the alibi of tyrants, and they're usually going to use children first. We're seeing that with the Real ID argument. We're seeing that obviously here as well. And at the end of the day, what's actually happening here, the government is trouncing on the rights of the people to be able to take their children out of public school, which in my opinion is nothing more than an indoctrination center for statists, and, deny their right to educate their children in whichever way they see fit.
Well, I think it's even simpler than that. Like, I think you are ascribing to them, I think rightfully so, but I think partially true, that you're ascribing to them a ideology that they're trying to enforce. I think it's even more simplistic than that. I think it is that homeschooling across the country, but especially in New England, is becoming more popular. And states like Maine, for example, where we are in the bottom 15% in terms of performance, the way you get around that is by pulling those kids out of public school and bringing them to homeschool. At the same time, there's a bunch of legislation that's being pushed in multiple different states for things like school choice or voucher programs and so on and so forth. If you allow that to continue, you are pulling dollars away from these institutions. All these institutions have teachers' unions, they all have labor unions, they have people that they're trying to keep employed. So imagine, for example, if you saw a 15% decrease in public school attendance because of people got pulled, how many teachers will get fired, how much consolidation of schools would there have to be, how many janitors, how many unions, how many administrators. I think this argument is more economic than it is ideological, in the sense that it's not just dollars, it's also federal dollars.
Basically, protectionism. Is that what you're saying? Like, they're basically, the government's just protecting their own ass and their own coffers.
How do we think it's the government? I think it's the administrative state, because we think of when we talk about things like that, the administrative state or deep state, what they want to say, we think of it only at the national level. But the same entanglements that create that apparatus at the national level also exist in every single state. Every state has its teacher union. Every state has its labor union. So to assume that same type of mentality wouldn't trickle down to a state, especially a state like Connecticut, it's not surprising.
This is my whole argument, though, is that tilt or that kind of mode for people to kind of operate in literally is taught to them through the education system.
Agreed.
Right? So it's a self-eating snake, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. I think overall, go ahead, Matt.
Now, just looking at some of the numbers here. So, pre-COVID, in the state of Maine, 6,800 students were homeschooled. During COVID, it went up to about 12,000. As of 2024, we're still at about 10,000 plus students in Maine are homeschooled. It's about 6 to 7% of students in Maine are homeschooled. And the realization of Maine's rank within the country, that's kind of new. It was up until recently, Maine actually ranked fairly high in their education. It's not until recently that it's really dropped. And so you're going to see this number going up. And school boards are, I was watching a clip from Bangor, from their school district, where they are openly talking about we are losing students to homeschooling, and this is a problem for them. So, that's where the concern comes in for homeschooling families is it. Are we going to get reported to CPS just because we want a better education for our kids?
A different kind of education. To your point, Dane, like I'll use us for example. Like me and Sam have talked about this. If we were to homeschool, like yes, the state mandates the certain criteria of what needs to be taught, but outside of that, like the absolutely mandatory thing that the state says needs to be taught, do I want to mirror like the same curriculum that's at a traditional public school? Probably not. Like I want my kids to be outside more. I want my kids to be doing target practice, doing some gardening with my wife, maybe doing some hunting with me. Like, so their overall curriculum changes from being purely based on this Rockefeller assembly line production New World Order rubric to something that's probably a lot more close to what the founders had in mind. Where they need to be able to read and write and do some basic arithmetic kind of stuff. But the more important thing is like, can they garden? Can they hunt? Can they balance a checkbook? Like, can they build a deck using materials from Home Depot? Like those types of things probably have far more value than 85% of things that's taught in your average public school. And if people wake up to that fact, to Matt's point, that will just keep like it's already spreading, but it'll accelerate. And like I said, like if you try to take money away from unions, teacher unions and school administrators, like those people can get pretty vicious. Like, hey, go to any school board meeting and talk about funding and let's wash the place erupt. So it's something to keep an eye on. But
I mean, just the fact that the legislature here is looking to pass a law, right now, municipalities can vote on accepting or not accepting the school board budget. The school board proposes a budget, you vote to accept it. The state's looking to pass a law that you don't need to do that anymore. The school board just decides the budget, and that's where that ends, and you pay whatever they decide. So that should be very telling. And also, nobody should care more about your children's education than the parents.
Absolutely. And a bit of a white pill on this topic. Our neighbors to the west, New Hampshire, just passed the Home Education Freedom Act on a vote of 174 to 166, and it removes nearly all state requirements such as compulsory reporting and government oversight. It makes New Hampshire one of the least regulated states for home education. Not that I'm advocating for any of you guys to go ditch Maine and go move to New Hampshire, but I wouldn't blame you if you did. But cheers, bully for them. Because
I think we'll see the fruits of that in the next 10 years or so. Like you'll start seeing it happen quite quickly, especially with Gen Alpha as they mature and start to matriculate and go into like I say secondary school, to go into junior high school and high school and so on and so forth. Like you'll start seeing the outcomes, and it'll be one of those things where like, how do New Hampshire scores go up so much where they have so little regulation? That's going to be an uncomfortable truth.
Weird how that happens.
So let's go into some, like we're talking about how this is overreach on Connecticut's half, and how we mentioned how that trickles into Maine with what Matt was just talking about. With that idea in mind, with Maine overreaching, there's two specific bills I want to go over really quick. The first one, and I think this one will be interesting to talk about, is LD 1821, which is an act to ensure responsible business practices by licensed firearms dealer. What this basically does is it will increase reporting standards and requirements for an FFL. The long story short, trickle down 10,000 foot level of this is much of the smaller FFLs, like especially if you live in rural Maine like I do or Matt does, where you have the small little store with nothing around it for 30 or 40 miles. These places are not likely going to be able to keep up with some of this reporting standard that the state wants to implement, which means that you start seeing those places close down. These little FFLs start going away. A lot of places, like for example, myself, have an FFL more just for suppressor and other reasons. But like a lot of these small little mom and pop shops who may only have 1 or 2 transfers a month if they're lucky, you'll see them slowly start giving up on it just without like the cost reward. Like I have to go through all this stress, keep all this documentation for this amount of time. is it worth it for the 1 or 2 FFLs transfers I get in every month, or do I just like give it up altogether and let someone else have to deal with the headache? So I do think this is one of those, you can't outlaw it, so make it really, really, really difficult, and you'll still get the same outcome at the end.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hey, sorry, I was fishing for my my mute button there. You know, one thing that we saw during the Biden administration. So traditionally, FFL record keeping is never going to be 100% perfect. There's always going to be an error here or there. We're not talking egregious. Oh, I somehow lost 40 rifles. It's all right. This happened. The sale happened at 4:05, and I accidentally wrote 4:15 instead of 4:05. Previously small clerical errors like that. Normally it was hey, fix it, and don't do it again, and it's fine. These are real minor infractions. During the Biden administration, it was a zero tolerance. If you did that, they would take your FFL. And I think I saw the statistics where, over 1,000 FFLs had their licenses taken for minor clerical errors during this. This does allow for the same thing, where police can at any time inspect all of the records within an FFL without any sort of warrant. Just come in and say, we want to go through all your records, and anything found does risk, losing your license and closing the shop. Hardening of the site, monitoring for multiple angles. It has to be indoor, outdoor. Point of every sale has to have a camera that's monitored by an outside agency. Training, posting of not just laws, but posting of things that the legislature decides. Things like ammunition and firearms should be kept separate. Those words would need to be posted at point of sale. There's no law that requires that, but it gives the impression that that is a law, because that's posted where you buy the gun, that you're supposed to keep your ammunition and your firearms separate. So it's a significant overreach.
So would that mean that anyone that concealed carries would have to disarm in order to go to a gun shop?
Ooh.
I don't think there's anything that says that. I think it talks, that particular thing was for storage. So you're supposed to, when you store your guns, you're supposed to store the ammunition separate.
I see. That's for the FFL itself. This isn't for private.
No, this is for private. So at the point of sale, the FFL has to post a sign that can be easily read by who's ever buying a gun. Things like, I don't know if I had it in here. Suicide is the number one, killer with guns. You have to post these words, and there's a whole bunch of statements, none of which is a law. Again, there's no law that says you have to, when you store your firearm, you have to keep the ammunition separate. But at the FFL, they have to post that so the buyer can see that. So it begins to start, well, we're not forcing you to do this, but if you don't know any better and know you don't have to do that, you're going to see that and go, oh, I need to keep the ammunition and the firearms separate. So it's, just like Jason said, it's circumventing. We can't outlaw firearms. So what we're going to do is, make them impossible to get and make them useless to own, basically.
Come and take it. That's what I have to say.
Yeah. Well, that leads in really good to another bill that's happening, and that's being considered in Maine, which is Maine LD.229, an act to bring fairness in income taxes to Maine families by adjusting the tax bracket and tax rates. For those who are not aware, about 6 months ago, there was a bill that passed and went ahead and already adjusted the tax rates in Maine. This is one of the things that we actually posted quite a bit about when we were doing some posts last year. I believe it was LD.228, which adjusted the tax bracket. It also implemented things like the Netflix tax or the subscription services, an increase in taxes on tobacco products, which hurts me as a cigar smoker. So we already had a tax increase or tax changes in the last 6 months. This new bill, what it would do is it would lower the bottom tax rate for people who are making $27,000 as a single person or up to $55,000 as joint, down to about 5.5%. So it'd be a decrease of about 0.3%. For people who are making $144,000 or more as a single person or $289,000 as a joint, it would increase up to 7.75%, which is almost a 1% increase. And on income over $500,000 as a single person or $1 million joint, it would go up to 8.9% of overall income. That would be another 1% on top of what we have now already on the books. So basically, the lowest portion of people in the state would be seeing a slight decrease, about 0.3%. These other two income brackets would be seeing a 1% point jump on each one. But just really quickly, I just want to throw those stats out before we get into talking about this in more earnestly. So for people who are making over that what was the number 144,000 single. So that group of subset of people, so making $144,000 to about $238,000, currently pay 20% of all tax revenue in the state. People who make $238,000 to $701,000 are another 18% in tax revenue, and then people making over $700,000 are another 26% in tax revenue, which means that the people who will be seeing the 1% jump in their tax rates are already paying about 62% of all tax revenue in the state. So what we're doing is this subset of people who pay the majority of the taxes in the state will have to be paying more in tax revenue, while people who are in that lowest economic part, which is less than $30,000 a year, will get a slight rebate. But here's a very fun fact in the state of Maine, because of the bunch of different services we have here in terms of social services. On that lowest quintile of people, revenue earners of less than $30,000, less than 0.01% of those people actually pay into the state income tax as it is currently. So this is one of those like economic tricks that we would talk about in Economics 101 all the time, is if you offer a tax rebate to a demographic of people who are not already being taxed, it sounds as if you're working for the little man,
right?
But if you're taxing or increasing taxes on your middle class to upper middle class, you can go ahead and tell the people, well, we're sticking it to the millionaires and the billionaires, in the words of Bernie Sanders, while you're not actually making any substantive change to tax policy to that lowest quintile. All you're doing is basically use that lowest quintile to smuggle in the higher tax rate on the top quintile of earners. So it's like, this is basically like smoke and mirror economic stuff. This happened in Europe for a long time. But we'll start with that. You guys for it? Like, what do you think, guys? You want to give us some more money?
No, of course not.
I think that's yeah, go ahead, Dane. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, I think we all agree on this in this room, and whomever's watching, taxation is theft, and for about 40% of the year, it's actually straight up slavery, because you work for free for your tax burden over the year. No, this is, I mean, again, it's going to work though, right? Because most people are low information voters, and they're going to view this exactly how you just outlined it. Yep. I think that this is a Robin Hood-esque tax policy, which it definitely isn't.
The sad thing is, and this is where I get really worked up about stuff like this, and I agree with you that taxation is theft, but I'm going to try to play a little bit of devil's advocate here, or the populist argument. If I am receiving services that are high quality, I think Tucker makes this argument. If I'm living in Singapore and I have this like crazy infrastructure, and I have almost zero crime, and we got hyperloops everywhere, and we've got buried power lines throughout the state of Maine, and we have a top 10 education system, can there be an argument that could be made to say, hey, this taxes is paying for that? Do you really want to lose those services? there's an actual conversation to be had there. Not saying I agree with the argument, but at least there's like a valid starting point. But if you're telling me that we are bottom 10 in the country in education, we have one of the oldest infrastructures in the U.S. where we have windstorms and people can lose power for hours, if not days. If you're telling me that we have, well, you guys are driving around now with all the frost heaves we have every year, there's a slight patch job that's done over the road to get through the summer for when the tourists come. And by winter, it all goes back to how it was all over again.
Yeah.
So if we're receiving the quality of service, but you still want to keep upping my tax rate to the place now that would be top 5 in the country for that same quintile of earners, well, what am I getting back for my money?
Exactly.
And I think that's one of those conversations that, like, if this is a private sector thing, we always have this conversation of, like, we complain now about, stagflation, or we talk about, like, foodflation, where you get a potato chip bag that used to be 3/4 the way full, but now it's halfway full and you're paying more for it. Like, these are things that we talk about all the time, but when it comes to government, we rarely have the conversation of, well, if at the state level you're taking 9% of my income and the federal government's taking another 30, 35% of my income on average, which means like 44% of my income is gone. To your point, if you work a 5-day work week, that means 2 of those days that pay does not belong to you. What am I
You're
getting back for
literally
that?
working for free. That is the definition of slavery. As hyperbolic as that might sound to people, it is. Look up in the dictionary what slavery is.
Yeah, I think
One
this is
thing
one of those things. It's weird.
I was digging around for, because I sent this out the other day. This is from the Census Bureau, and I wish I could bring it up. I don't think we can bring up just pictures within this. But it talks about this is in 2022, just for context. Expenditures within the state. The the number one expenditure by far, public welfare. 30.3% of expenditures within the state of Maine is public welfare, followed by other, whatever other is. But then right behind that is education at 27.2%. The next closest is highways at 7.4% of expenditures.
The thing that actually you think you want to get taken care of.
When we look at all this, 27% of our expenditures goes to a failing education system. 30% goes to, public welfare in whatever form it takes. And then the scraps go to 2.2% for health, 1% for hospitals, 2% for police protection, 1.4% for utilities.
It's your power grid.
But 30% to public welfare and 27% to a failing education system.
Like, really let that settle in for a second is, so we say 30% for welfare, and we've talked about this before on the podcast day. In the state of Maine, it's getting close to almost 50%. It's like 48.2% of Maine residents are on some type of assistance in the state. So you're saying that we have the oldest state in the country per capita. We have almost half our state on some type of assistance, and then we're expecting this subset of earners of $150,000 up to whatever to pay 60% of taxes. And let's be really, really frank. If you want to live in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath home on a 1/4 acre, and you as an individual are making less than $100,000 a year in the state of Maine, good luck. Just good luck. Like, I think it's very, very, very difficult unless you had family who sold you your home, or you so happened to find some kind of deal. But me and my wife are in the process of selling our home. So we get to see some of the listings and stuff and talk to our realtor. Someone nearby to us had a 3-bedroom mobile home on 4 acres, $325,000 house. And that would be considered like a starter home 10, 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
So like that idea of being able to have a $300,000 home at 6.75% interest, which is where we're at right now, would mean that your monthly payment is going to be somewhere around $2,200 a month, not including utilities, which we have the 3rd highest energy cost in the entire U.S. So like
Right.
you easily get into the place where if you want that house, like you need to make $100,000 or more, which means now you're going to be taxed at 7.5, well, almost 8%.
And again, what are you getting for that? I mean, I know that this is a question that's creeping into more, more of the normal Joe Schmo that doesn't really pay attention to this stuff, right? Yeah, they might see their property tax go up, a couple points every other couple years or whatever, but it's becoming more and more obvious to the non-attentive voter that the state and the municipalities are taking more and more from them, and the services, at least from my own anecdotal perspective, the services are either staying the same or they're getting worse. I mean, part of that might be a product of the inflationary situation with our currency, but that's not all of it, right? It's just there's a system here that's built to steal from all of us, and it's working because we're not objecting.
Yeah, I think the big part is not just it's where's all the money going? What is the 28.3% in that other? I'm not going to be naive enough to say we don't need roads or we don't
Right.
need education. We do need to educate the populace, but if we had all that money, we could do that. We could educate these kids and we could keep our roads up. But what's that 28.3% other? I went down this interesting rabbit hole a few years back. This is at the federal level, looking at federal grants. And if you ever want to, I don't know what's happened since this administration took over, because this was, during the last administration. But if you ever want to get angry at where your tax money's going, look up the register of federal grants that exist. $3 million to teach. It was a country that I had never heard of, and I'm not completely stupid, but it was a country I had never heard of. A $6 million contract to go teach them how to wear condoms. This isn't a joke. This is what you hear, but the federal government was going to award somebody $6 million to go teach people how to wear condoms in a country that has no bearing on our life whatsoever. And there was hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of pages of grants that existed, and they all looked like this. This is where your money's going. So when we say, why do our highways suck? Well, because 6 million here, 6 million there. And when we try to make the cuts, politicians say, well, it's only 6 million. What's the problem? Well, because there's 100,000 of these 6 millions that lead to 28.3% of our other that goes to who knows what.
Well, especially here in this state where we've seen already a bunch of really blatant abuses of things like no bid contracts, and how we know how rampant it is, especially in the state of Maine, like how Mills was giving out contracts left and right for
Propaganda.
For everything. Not just propaganda, but like when you think about the wall being built around the governor's mansion, how that was
There
a
actually
no-bid
was
contract.
Right. Actually, no, but I mean, there actually was. I'm trying to remember the details. There was a stipend that was given to, I think it was the Portland Press Herald. It might have been the Journal.
I thought it was Bangor. Was it Bangor Daily News? What's the? I thought it was.
Anyway, it was something. It was in the order of like low millions, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. It might have been like high hundred thousands, but still, it was literally to write articles in favor of whatever the administration was doing at the time. I think it was like during late COVID era, if I remember serves.
Yep.
That means they're stealing from us to pay their friends to basically gaslight us for when we were trying to look for information on what's going on in our state.
There's your other.
So I think as you kind of look at this, and it's education. Most people that are going to be watching this podcast are, other libertarians, but they go out into the world and they have friends that don't watch this podcast and aren't libertarians. And what tends to happen, me included, you get that tinfoil hat on and you start getting all excited, like that scene in Tommy Boy. You start talking about all this crazy stuff, and what happens is people kind of go, "All right, yeah, I'm sure that happened." Where you can have it, we can make this available from the Census Bureau. This is a government document that shows where your money is going. And it hits a lot harder, going back to talking about the grants. I was talking with a Democrat friend of mine, great guy. We were talking, and I was like, this is where your money's going. And he kind of looked at it and went, and kind of had a little bit of a moment like, man, this is messed up. This is where my money's going. And when they can actually see it like that on paper, they go, oh, yeah. And so part of that, and for me, part of the reason why I try to get involved here is to get involved and say, hey, there are facts behind this that show what this is. And it's not just me with my crazy tinfoil hat on, which I tend to do all the time. It's, here's the numbers, man. We're not just going crazy. And so, what I try to tell people is have this stuff on your phone, have this stuff on your computer. And when somebody goes, it's not that bad, here you go. This is what it is.
I
That's my
have
little soapbox there.
No, I totally agree with you. And because I myself am very much, I try as hard as I can not to be in a silo, but I fully acknowledge that I completely am. And that's because I've been involved in politics for 20 plus years and been a libertarian for a little bit longer than that. And it does, for those of us who are in it, doing this shit every day, at these levels, like we tend to forget that like your inroads to the normie types are those examples, right? Are those, like, I have a running note in my phone of links just on specific topics, right? Whether it be like a bunch of different stuff. I won't even go into what it is, but because a lot of these like culture issue things that tend to just be in the general conversation that you're going to have at a barbecue or at a birthday party or whatever it might be, those are the types of things that people talk about. But if you start spewing like we all tend to do, you're exactly right, Matt. We tend to seem like crazies, and then people just are like, yeah, okay, whatever, like crazy Uncle Dane, whatever. And they'll dismiss the facts that we're trying to alert them at. And I think that's part of the problem too, is that because we're so into all of this and are aware, because we kind of, I don't know what the motivations are, but because we're so aware of all this stuff, that the moment that issue comes up, we're really excited to like tell what, you know what I mean? Like what's actually going on, because we've done the 2-hour deep dive into it or whatever it might have been. But yeah, you're right. It's important to kind of zoom out and try to think of a more productive inroad there.
Well, yeah, I'll end this part of the conversation before we move on site. This is actually a topics with this, again, from my economics background, because I can't help myself. It is unsurprising that the average voter does not understand the way that the tax system works and what those funds are being used towards. When the average American citizen has been a victim of a system that has moved from a true free market capitalist system to a more captured corporatist, semi-crony well, not even semi, fully crony capitalistic system. And this is the preference I'll make, because I don't want people to say like, hey, you sound like a leftist. I am very pro-free markets. I'm very pro-capitalist. However, in a free market and a true capitalistic system, businesses are allowed to succeed, but they're also allowed to fail. And the government does not get a say to pick who fails and who succeeds. Also, in a more true capitalistic system, where you look at someone like, I don't know, look at some of the English Enlightenments and even some of the early Austrian economics, and talking about people we like Ludwig von Mises, or even when you look at Locke, if you want to go to the actual epistemology of it all. The idea of the free market and of capitalism was to be able to maximize human flourishing by allowing people to enter into contracts willingly without the use of force. But also the idea was that because these people were living in a mostly homogenous society, that they wouldn't want to screw each other over. Like if me and Dane are two Englishmen in England who have roots that have been there for 500 years, if Dane screws me over, I can tell the whole town that Dane screwed me over, and I don't go to this blacksmithing shop anymore. I won't buy his product. And because it's a free market system, his now business fails, and he has to like now rectify the situation, reconcile with real estate.
So we still sort of have that with like social boards, Yelp, you know, like we still sort of have that like social ramification mechanism.
So we do have that, I agree. At the Main Street mom and pop level, I would agree with you. That still exists.
Okay.
When you get to the larger and larger, if you go ahead and leave 1,000 bad Yelp reviews on Sam's Club, do you think Sam's Club really gives a flying fuck?
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, right.
Amazon too. I know I can speak for myself. I don't know how many accidental packages that didn't get shipped or got lost, or they said it got shipped 4 days ago, then they canceled the order, and
that shit's getting gamed now too. You know,
of course it is.
There are bot farms now that are literally just being solicited for the exact purpose of, you know, hedging against that shit because they know their product's shit, so they flood the friggin' review market with a bunch of fucking bots. Yeah.
So when you live in that economic climate day in and day out, like, and you're just hoping that the thing you bought isn't a scam, it isn't made out of plastic, it's not going to break on you within 10 seconds.
Right.
If that's the economic environment that you've grown up in, on top of Facebook hitting you every 5 seconds with an ad for some gizmo that doesn't work or do anything, you expect that same person to know, well, you know, actually, the way that the tax rate system in Maine works is this, this subset people get this tax rate, and we spend 30% on social. They don't know. And I don't expect them to know. And honestly, I don't expect them to know, which is why, Dane, like you said, when people like you or me or Matt start going on about, well, you see here, this bracket of people get taxed at this rate, and you do this and do that, we're speaking another language.
Right.
And I think it's less about, oh, he's a nutty conspiracy theorist, all of some of that, and more like, I just don't understand what you're saying and why it matters. And until we can get past that threshold, this is one of those things where I think that system is always going to have an advantage over us, which is why it's important we stay engaged. Yes, and why podcasts like this matter, no matter if it's only seen by 3 people or 3 million people. So hopefully those 3 people wake up to what's happening. But I think that's the way the system is able to continue doing what it's doing, is because it's betting that this is just the way it's always going to be. Yeah.
So absolutely. I mean, that's what we're seeing in the international kind of sphere right now, is that like the whole like the old media, you know, propaganda machine of Mockingbird, you know, everyone having the same script is still in play, but also there's a flood of just dross. And that's the game now, because we can all now, we're not all getting our information from 3 or 4 different places. We're now getting it from thousands of different places. And so what the game is now for propagandizing not just the American citizens, but everyone on every issue, is just flood it with shit. Just put the shit out there.
Yeah, it's not coincidental. It's the same process that's being applied to a different sphere of governance.
Right.
I would say that economics is part of governance as well. So
yeah, it's managing human behavior and real action.
So as we're talking about some more, as we talk about like the world as a whole outside of just New England, I think this is where we can lean into probably the subject that's going to eat up quite a bit of time and actually has a lot more impact on us here, even in Maine, than people realize, and that is the ongoing conflict in Iran. Not war, Dane. Conflict.
No,
it's not a war,
but it is a war.
Or it's an engagement.
Yeah.
Actually, this has actually made me laugh, and I think Matt will appreciate this. Technically, the 20-year GWAT, Global War on Terrorism, in terms of your definition of a war, was never actually a war because it was never ratified as an act of Congress. We never declared war on a foreign nation. I think it's a combination. I know in the UK, it was 5 military interventions and engagements. I think here in the US, it's 7 separate engagements that were each like broken off. So like, we basically take these 7 different military actions and piece them together, and we get the global war on terror. But I think if you went to the average American or Brit and said, "Hey, do you remember about that 20-year war we did in Afghanistan?" They'd be like, "Yeah." And like, "Was that a war?" They'd be like, "Yeah, of course it was a war. Like, what else
Right,
would it
of course,
be?"
yeah.
So it's one of those like play on words. It's always fun to watch. But I think what's happening now is even more startling, because the way that now we have reached a level of propaganda where we're gamifying warfare. And to that, if you don't mind,
Oh,
Matt,
dude,
can you
the
pull
White
up
House video, right?
the White House
Yes,
video? So this is the We Iran.
We have to put a White House official here.
Dude.
10. It's out. Slam dunk. You're right.
So
Dude, this is a horrible first take right after that, but it kind of makes me want to play Get Away right now.
the We was awesome, although
Dude.
maybe this few generations on, I think it holds up pretty good.
Yeah. But
I
that
think,
was from the official White House account on Twitter.
yeah, this isn't like an AI
How
slop thing.
Fucking disgusting is that? When I saw that, I was almost sick to my stomach. Like, what? This is. I mean, however you feel about the regime of Iran, like they're not friends, sure, but these are human beings, and this is the glorification of mass murder and destabilizing a sovereign nation.
Well, I think even more so, what's like really telling about this, and I've heard people like Brett Weinstein make this argument, and a bunch of other people I think are very clever. I think even Tucker made this argument. It's like, who are you trying to reach with this message? And let's be very frank, the average boomer doesn't know what a we is. But if they did, it's because they bought their grandson one God knows how long ago.
And they played it on Christmas, like
exactly. They don't know what a we is.
Years ago. Yeah.
So the generation of people who will understand the reference will be like millennials and some of Gen Z. And when we look statistically at like what demographics of Americans are least for this conflict, it is millennials and Gen Z. Especially the millennial generation, the older millennials, which I guess I consider that older millennial, because one, we were old enough to remember 9/11, and a good amount of us served in the GWAT, and we came back and had to deal with the consequences after that whole kerfuffle was over, and the VA system and the health ministry system in the UK, and our friends and the suicide rate and the rise of. So we understand all these things. And Gen Z, they understand it because those people were their brothers and their fathers and their cousins. So they remember these things. So for you to try to market to them in like, here's some Gen Z millennial, you guys like video games, right? Isn't this cool? It's like, know your audience, man. Like, the people who are supporting this the most are your 55 and older, primarily Fox News viewers. Or some people who are just, I hate using the word mega cultists because the left likes to throw that at anyone who voted for Trump.
Yeah.
But people who are so Trump focused, not even MAGA focused, that they're Trump loyalists and boomers. So that's your audience, and they don't watch this stuff in the first place. I think that's why you saw such. I think this made me get some hope in society was when you went on X and this happened. The amount of people going like, "What is this, man?" Like it was quick, it was immediate. I think if you actually go onto the video on X, it's been ratioed by like 4x. So like, it was obvious that the people that they were trying to like message to with this were not feeling the same way that the White House thought they would, and just in terms of like marketing and PR,
is advising the market. Like, who's running the Twitter handle for the White House?
Levin.
Who?
Mark Levin.
You think so? Oh man, that would make
Mark Levin with Ben Shapiro as his proxy. Ben Shapiro's actually logged into the account.
That would make a lot of sense. Oh my God, I really hope it's not, but
Hey, but I think, Jason, you brought up a good point. We can really tie this into our previous discussion. Is who is the audience and who are they trying to reach with this? I mean, the fact
People
that
that are going to try and draft.
the people that actually can think one way or the other on the geopolitical consequences of this aren't watching those videos on Twitter, but a lot of the people that are watching those videos on Twitter are equate this to a video game and equate this to they what do you have to do? Bells and whistles and dings like your Pavlov's dog, and that's what gets the reaction. So when we start talking about our education rates within the country, the fact that we can't in a forum like Twitter or whatever, and any of these public forums,
TikTok,
have a rational discussion on this is why we did this. This was the outcome. These are the pros. These are the cons. Let's have a rational discussion. It's going to be, well, let's make some dings and treat it like it's my 4-month-old, and that's how we're going to present this, because that's how the people that are watching these videos are going to react. The three of us can have a rational discussion, and again, whichever way you kind of feel about the conflict there, we can have a rational discussion on what's happening. That we are not the audience of that video,
right?
But a large amount of Americans are the audience of that video, whether good or bad, and that's how they take in information. Unfortunately,
Matt, I'm actually curious what you think about what I'm about to say next, because I know that we are from a similar generation of war fighters, in that I remember the horrible propaganda that the Taliban put out, especially when they captured U.S. service members or Brit service members, and like how they would almost like music video fly it, and then they would like basically spread it all over the internet. Like, I don't know how many times I would get back like inside the wire heading, and then there'd be some guy watching it, but what the hell is that? And it sounds like a really cheesy 1980s MTV video, and it was propaganda of one of our guys getting their heads cut off or something. And I remember being like, it was already horrid, disgusting, and made me pissed that you did that to like one of my brothers. But the fact that you thought like putting it behind like a 1980s music video is like, now you're just trying to be insulting on top of it. Like, it's not enough that you did this thing, but you're trying to like to propagandize me using my own culture and weaponize it against me. Like, how dare you? Like, what do you think like this was gonna make me like back down now and go, oh my God, I'm so scared, I want to go home. Like, I remember feeling insulted. So the idea that the White House is using a similar tactic, I don't think they understand like the irony of it.
I mean, I don't know with some of those videos. Again, I don't know who the audience was. Were we the audience, or was fellow Taliban? In my case, I was an Iraq guy, so fellow Shia militias or Sunni militias. I think that was the audience. You'd talk to local Iraqis. I was there 2003, 5, and 10. They still love Michael Jackson. They loved Michael Jackson.
Right.
This is 2005. Loved it. And so, when you look at who are they, what's the audience? I don't think it was necessarily us. I think they're, they rally the troops amongst that. Hey, we're meeting the intifada and killing the infidels.
It may have had a double entendre there, though. At the same time, right? It was speaking to their ilk in a revelatory kind of way, and then it was also insulting, your station as well.
Yeah. Actually, when Matt put it that way,
we still went and looked at it. I mean, I don't know why we did. We get back from a patrol. Hey, let's look at Live Leak. Oh, that was a horrible idea. Why not just do that?
I think Matt, you're 100% right. Especially when you put it that way, I agree that even this Iran video that we just saw, you're right. We're not the target audience, and I don't even think most of MAGA necessarily is the target audience. But when you see the people who are like grandizing this, like the idea that Pete Hegseth was like proud of it, or like Ben Shapiro was proud of it, or
also mind you, this was 12 days after we had started the attack too, right?
Yeah. About what?
I think that was March 12th.
I think it was 10. but still, yeah, regardless.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a target audience.
Well, so my wife and I had this great discussion, and I wish I could find the article we were talking about. I'm going to try and do it when I'm not talking. Find at least the author on Facebook. Talking about we were talking really just kind of talk about the No Kings protest and everything else, and just the infantilizing, is that a word?
Infantilizing
of people, and you see the way protesters act, and and that again, this was the discussion we were having that brought this up, was really acting like children. We're talking dressing up like unicorns, and throwing hissy fits like a toddler would. And you look at something like this, and again, this is the we was for kids. This is something for children. And so the discussion went around this idea that we have a whole generation of people. You look at it throughout society, just the way people act in their relationships, their marriages, their work relationships, everything. They are still acting like just a child. And so is this the level we're getting to, that grown adults, 40-year-olds, you treat them like they're 8, 6, because that's what they react to. And I'm going to look for this article, because it's a great article. I'll try and link it through, but it talks about like, is this what's happening with our society, where we're stuck as infants now?
What one? What? Well, actually, I want to take this down the same topic though, but like more of a, I guess it'd be a somewhat personal twist. But I'm also very curious what the two of you think about my interpretation of this as well. Is I think this is very interesting that this is happening, because at the same time that this was put out, there is a split happening within MAGA that's more ideologically defined. And I mean ideologically, I mean mainly seeing it theologically is probably the better word to say. I think this all started with a recent event that took place, where there was a Catholic member of the Board for Religious Liberty who was kicked off of said board because, as a Catholic, she expressed that she does not believe in Zionism or dispensation because it is against Catholic doctrine. Today, Mr. Kent also stepped out of his role, citing some of his concerns and thinking that this was a provocation on the side of the U.S. and was unnecessary. For those who don't know, Joe Kent, also a devout Catholic. He's actually going to be at the Catholic for Catholics conference this Thursday, so I'm very excited to hear him speak there, even more so coming up with this. And if you look online, not just X, but looking like places like Instagram, because I can't help myself, on a bunch of like different Catholic forums and stuff like that. Well, there does seem to be this divide where you have a lot of traditional Catholics. Tom Woods is a perfect example of this too, because Tom is a fellow libertarian and someone who's a devout Catholic. He's also making a lot of these same arguments online of, hey guys, like, forget about just like the pure insanity that they put out a we video, but like, if we're saying that we are founded on the same ideals of the founding fathers and of the English Enlightenment, like, hey, these people all had very specific theology. They all believed in one form or another. I'm going to use the term just war doctrine, but that's a Catholic dogma, but most Christianity has their own forms of it. An idea of like, hey, how do you justify a war? Like, what is a war that is justified? How can you say that this war is not just morally just, but is also in the best interest of its people, citizenry? And Just War Theory by St. Augustine is one of those documents that had a lot of influence on the English Enlightenment thinkers. Locke speaks about it quite a bit. Also, if you talk, I've heard some of the things from George Washington and his concern about like forward interventionism. He actually cites St. Augustine.
In his full address,
he cites St. Augustine and takes like quotes from him from Just War Doctrine. So there was this big blow up that's happening online with a lot of traditional Catholics, conservative Catholics going, hey, like, yes, like, we're concerned about what the international landscape were concerned about what's happening in Iran, how they're persecuting Christians, how they're killing protesters. Like, yes, all these things are horrible things. No one here is going to say that Iran is a beautiful, wonderful place and we should try to mirror that here. Of course not. At the same time, why are we going there? Is this something that we should be involved in? Has it met the criteria for us to want to have involvement in it? And there does seem to be that debate happening online. So I think it's very interesting that this is something that I had not seen when I was deployed. Was a lot of the arguments happening that was purely political, left versus right. Now it seems to be morphing into more of a combination of like realpolitik and theological arguments that are being used to like try to take this anti-war position, which I find very interesting. And Dane, as someone who was brought up in the Catholic Church but is no longer a practicing Catholic, I'm curious what you think about something like that.
Ask the question a little bit more poignantly and differently, because I was trailing a little bit there.
Yeah. Do you also believe that the argument, so some of these anti-war arguments are no longer being made purely on a political, I'm using political terminology.
No.
But it has more to something more theological, and is that a positive thing?
I think for the, like, as far as the general lexicon goes, the recent departures and public events that we've seen are certainly from a more of a theological standpoint, with Baller and Kent for sure. I don't see it as a positive or negative that's occurring. I mean, I think that at this point, any principled person that we can get to stand on a soapbox and I mean, I won't know the scripture because it's been over 30 years since I've read the Bible, but I know that there is a what is it called? It's like a charge to Christians to call out evil, right? To call out sin, if you will. Is that correct? I don't know what the scripture is. Matthew something, if memory serves, but
anyway. Quite a few. But yeah, I get what you're going for, like 2 Timothy 4:2, Romans 12:9.
Right. So with people like these two Catholics that have kind of raised their hands, that were in, with Ballard, she wasn't necessarily in the administration, but she was part of a important committee that based on the religious freedom, religious liberties committee, I think it was the name of her committee. I find it difficult to poke any holes in her argument. Same with the director of the Counterterrorism Center, Joe Kent. I read his statement and I find it difficult to poke any holes in his reasoning. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. I think the reason why I find it so interesting is that, like, a lot of the voices, and just out of curiosity, I think this is very, very interesting. I don't think it's a product of Catholicism, but I think it is a product of a generation of people who are more interested in, let's say, the spiritual world than was the last 20th. Like, we saw the rise of new atheism, we saw the rise of the more intellectualism, and it does seem, especially with Gen Z men, that they're returning back to more religiosity, especially the traditional religions. So when you see people like, I don't know, Tucker Carlson, an Anglican, which is, I would say, a very disordered wannabe Catholic, but still someone who is more associated with, like, the traditional Catholic Church. Megyn Kelly, a Catholic. Candace Owens, a Catholic. Tom Woods, a Catholic. Like, it seems that there is a very distinct line being drawn between there's even a bunch of people on, like, the Eastern Orthodox crowd, which and we have our own disagreements with as Catholics and Orthodox, but the theology is very similar. And these are the people who seem to be taking a very, not just line in the sand, but are willing to like take the arrows in this anti-war.
So one thing that I'm noticing, just as a disaffiliated Catholic and 25 plus year Buddhist, I'm noticing that the blatant rejection of dispensationalism is now, like, allowed. Like, the Overton window is shifted. I don't know what changed that. I also think that I lost my train of thought. Oh shit. No, continue. Sorry, I lost my train of thought completely. Fuck.
No, I'll piggyback off what you were just talking about. I think you're right. It does come down to dispensation, because when you hear people like Ted Cruz make the argument, or even Mike Huckabee the argument of why we need to be assisting Israel, they're not making it a purely political argument. They are making a theological argument, a religious argument. And as much as people hate the idea of religion and politics, I hate to have to tell you, if you have any type of religious belief, your religion is involved in politics. Like if you have some type of moral grounding that you base on a spiritual conception of the world, then your politics is, you cannot separate it from your religious belief. Does that mean that we should have like theocracies? Of course not. Like the founding fathers would have abhorred it. Like we moved away from that system of governance. But this idea that like, oh yeah, I am a practicing Catholic or a practicing evangelical or other form of Protestant, and I go to church every Sunday, I read the Bible, I pray with my wife and kids every night. But when I go into that building where I'm supposed to make laws, my religion stays at the door. Like, come on, of course not. Like it would be naive to think that's the way it is. So when people do start to make religious arguments for things like warfare, which is what Ted Cruz is doing, which is what Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro are doing, which is what a lot of people at the Babylon Bee are doing, they're making a religious argument for why we should be in foreign entanglement, which I think in itself is like, all right, like you're going into some territory that we all agreed with, that we all said that we weren't going to go. But if you're going to go there and you're going to start bringing theology into why we should or should not be doing things, well, then all theology has a say, not just yours. So the Catholic theology has a say, the Buddhist theology has a say, any theology that is inside that the people in the country are practicing. If you want to make the religious argument for it, I can make the religious argument against it. And if I choose to do so, as that the woman on the committee did, to think that I'd be removed because I make the same religious arguments you do, but now I'm just going against the same narrative that you already have, and now that makes me, what is it, anti-Semitic? Yeah. Because I'm holding to my doctrine and my faith. Is like, you said that this is a pool that we could all swim in, but then the minute I dip my toe in it and make a better argument, now I'm not allowed in the pool anymore.
Well, right. I mean, and this is something that we've seen, honestly, for 70 plus years, to be completely honest, because JFK had questions about the Israel lobby specifically around the time of the war. Yeah, right. Another Catholic, yes. I mean, like, it's really, what I've been struggling with is like, it's really difficult to view or like this current conversation in anything but like there's that theological dividing line of the dispensationalism, which I don't fully comprehend, but I know what it actually means, of like what Israel means effectively, right? If I'm going to dumb it down really, really stupidly. And I know that the Catholic and the Orthodox perspective is that Israel means those that revere Christ and go to church, whereas like the Protestant and probably Jewish contingency would view Israel as like the nation state, basically.
Mostly true. I do want to add a caveat for some of my Protestant brothers and sisters, and not throw you all under the bus. Dispensation is actually it's a minority view, and even in American Protestantism, it's mostly an evangelical view. So like Lutherans don't believe in dispensation, Calvinists don't believe in dispensation, Methodists don't believe in dispensation. So it's like all the Protestant denominations that were present at the time of the founding do not believe in dispensation. Dispensation is like a late 1800s machination and ideology. So like if your church was founded before then, it probably doesn't believe in it.
Did that come from Schofield?
The Schofield Bible is how it was propagated, yeah. So before that, I don't want to bog us down in theology and stuff like that. But like, pre-Schofield Bible, the idea of all of Christianity was, you're the one that you communicated that Israel, the Israel that's referenced in the Gospels is the church militant, the entire church of Christians, all Christians everywhere, were all Israel. Post-Schofield Bible, it took it more to a actual, like, the nation state of Israel, or the land of Israel is Israel. But to your point, I think you're right, that line of dispensation was like a red line that no one was allowed to touch in American politics for quite a long time. And a lot of our politicians, especially on the right side of the aisle, I think this is also very interesting that there seems to be an overrepresentation of dispensationalists when we talk about the Republican Party, which is why the views of it have always been the way it is towards Israel. Like nothing against, like when I say Israel, I mean the nation state of Israel, don't mean Israelis, don't mean Jewish people, I mean the actual nation state of Israel, so that way I don't get called an anti-Semite. But the last, let me say years, the last 2 years, probably since the conflict started with October 7th, that dispensation conversation has become a topic that's like open for communication now. I think it's very telling. I think part of the reason why you have a lot of like the Ben Shapiro types, the Mark Levin types, other types like that are becoming so agitated at this conversation is because they never had to like come up with arguments to defend that position. Like you can tell when you go into a debate and the guy's never heard, like you debate with a communist who's never been told, like, hey, you know that communists killed millions of people? Have you heard of Mao? Or have you heard of like Stalin? Like if they've never heard these things before, and you start bringing these things up, they're like, what? And they can't actually articulate why communism makes sense anymore. I think the same thing happens with this argument where it's been a no-fly zone for the best of at least since Kennedy died. So you're talking about almost 50 years. So they haven't had to prepare argumentation. They haven't had to defend their position. More than 60-something years? Anyway.
It's almost 70, dude.
Almost 70 years. So so coming up on almost 3/4 of a century, this conversation was not allowed to be had.
Yeah.
And now it's being had at the same time where you see a big part of Gen Z men who overwhelmingly voted for Trump and were part of the coalition this past election cycle. And those same people are not going as much to some of these Protestant churches. They're going to more of the classical apostolic churches. They're going to your Lutheranism, your Reformed Baptist, some of these more traditional churches that do not believe in dispensation. So I do think it's like not coincidental. Like to take it away from theology, we're just looking at pure like social economics. As demographics change, as the boomers start to age out, as young men start leading to the right, if they are also going to these types of churches and they're also starting to adopt this type of philosophy and theology, it is going to have political consequences. Like whether we want to have a theological conversation or not, just the pure like realpolitik of it all is that the people that made the coalition, the libertarians, the young men, Latino men who are overwhelmingly Catholic, young Black men who are overwhelmingly Reformed Baptists and other denominations that don't believe in dispensation, as your coalition try to incorporate non-traditional voters for the first time this last go around, it's not surprising that this now becomes the reality of politics, where these people have a very different view about the nation state of Israel than the boomers from 25 years ago had, or that the Fox viewer has. Like these are just very opposed views of the world, and now they're clashing. Matt, I feel like we've like kicked you off the last little bit with the theology conversation. What do you think of all the?
I mean, so I was over here obviously kind of looking up some background stuff, and is this entire argument just specific to this conflict? Because it's Israel. Well, let's look at this and let's be honest. If given the opportunity, Iran would kill every Israeli that existed.
1,000%.
And so, when we look at this from a actual strategic standpoint, Israel becomes a base. When you talk, military tactics, assaulting a strong point, you got to gain a foothold. Israel is our foothold. Israel is, whether like it or not, whether they're using us or not, whether they have their own things that they're trying to accomplish or not, they still provide us a foothold in the Middle East. They still provide us with intelligence. They still provide us with the ability to get inroads into the Middle East. And like it or not, we are still wholly dependent on Middle Eastern oil, and that's what this all comes down to. If we were to relinquish any sort of influence in the Middle East, what wouldn't happen is everybody would go, all right, well, cool. Let's just go be Iranians and Saudi Arabians. Russia would come in, China would come in. I mean, China's late to the party, unfortunately for China.
They are.
But Russia would immediately come in, plus up everything, and they would try to be the influential power in the Middle East. They would try to control oil output in the Middle East. And so when we look at that, that's really what we're trying to do is get cheap oil for ourselves. I mean, ultimately.
I agree, but I think the one pushback I would give on that, I think this is, again, talking about tactics. Well, I'll use this for example. Yes, Israel is a foothold in the Middle East. It's not even the biggest foothold. I did Air Force bases in Qatar. NSA Bahrain is in Bahrain. Camp Afrajan is in Kuwait. Al-Dahar Air Force bases in the UAE. Prince Sultan Air bases in Saudi Arabia. Ufaq Asad Air Base is in Jordan. Incirlik Air Base is in Turkey. Ain al-Assad Air Base is in Iraq. Camp Lemonnier is in Djibouti. So we have a foothold with or without Israel. And that is the actual case. And I think the thing that's happening right now, as we talk about, for example, what's happening with the Strait of Hormuz and how Trump is having to ask European nations to get involved, part of the reason why is because Iran made a very tactically clear decision, and the first thing they did was start attacking these nation states, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, UAE. America has used our assets to protect Israel and not protect those nation states. And now every single one of those bases,
allies, by the way.
Now every single one of those military installations, about 15 to 20 of them, as of, I believe, yesterday morning, every single one of them has not closed. And every single one of those host countries are saying that when this conflict is over, they're not reopening them. So if we're talking about pure military tactics, you just sacrificed 20 permanent installations that had somewhere between 50,000 to 70,000 troops to defend one nation state out of a group of 15 that you have alliances with in that region. So the tactics have been a whole.
Why did we have those alliances? Why were those bases there?
The project from the 19th century.
Because guys like me went over there and
those bases were there for one reason, because Iran existed. When Iran doesn't exist.
Yeah, but I think the tough thing with Iran though is this is just one of these things where I will use the Joe Kent and one of my friends Mike Glover argument of Iran is a horrible place. It is not a friend to the United States. It's not a friend to the West.
The government is not.
I would agree. Well, yeah, when I talk about any of these things, I'm talking about, when I critique Israel, I'm not talking about the people of Israel. I'm talking about the nation, the government. Of course, they're fantastic people. Most of them are traditional Orthodox and Catholic, so I love them to death. But I will never, ever say that as Iran should be an ally to the United States. I think the thing is that we did, and we did effectively. I want to give credit to the guys who actually fought to do this. We have encircled them, to your point, with all these places. They ain't doing anything to us. They're doing stuff to Israel. I agree. If they're going to drop a nuke on something, it's not going to be the West Coast. Me and you both know, Matt, it goes more beyond just enrichment. You have to have the delivery method. You have an intercontinental ballistic missile. Iran does. They can't stop us from throwing up their oil refineries. They're not developing a ballistic missile yet. I'm not saying ever, but this moment they're not doing it. I think the whole conversation about this is, if you're telling me in 5 years, the conversation is that we're still having this Iran conversation, and now they've had 5 more years to move forward towards this program, I think there's a lot stronger argument to be made. And even if most of the anti-war people would disagree with me, I would actually sympathize with the argument. If in 5 years we're having this conversation, I would tell most libertarians, hey, man, I agree with you on anti-war most of the time, but we're at an impasse now, and I think we have to actually start having some really tough conversations on how much this anti-war thing makes. I just don't think that conversation needed to be had right now.
Yeah. So I agree. I don't think Iran poses a direct threat to the U.S. homeland now, or probably ever, to be perfectly frank. I don't think they.
There's always a chance, but I agree with you. Yeah.
There's sleeper cells here already.
Yeah, I mean, they're not gonna fly one of their non-existent F-14s over here.
Yeah.
They're not gonna do any of that. But you know, Israel, whether they admit it or not, has nukes, and they have as much of a mutually assured destruction theory as we do. So if gas becomes $3, $4, $5 because a couple cheap drones get flown into a hotel in UAE, imagine how much gas is going to be when you nuke Israel. And we can stomp our feet all we want and say we shouldn't be in the Middle East for gas and oil. This country runs on oil.
Oh, I agree.
You know, there was a great scene in that Landman episode, if you've ever watched it, where Billy Bob Thornton talks about there's no replacement for oil.
So this is, I have a question here for both of you, because maybe you know more about it than I do. But from what I understand, the United States and Canada have the largest oil reserves of anywhere in the world.
Well, technically no. Venezuela has the largest oil reserve, which is why we were just there.
Okay.
Well, in terms of untapped oil reserve.
But also
their shitty oil is unprocessed, yes.
Yeah. Their oil, like, there's no, it's not advantageous to try and process Venezuelan oil.
Yeah,
from what I've read.
No,
it costs more to refine it than it does to even like sell it. Like,
I agree. But I think this is like the forest for the tree argument that's being made by this administration. If you're telling me we went to Venezuela, which, let's be realistic, we went there for oil. We did not go there because of Maduro, because we have his second in charge. We're basically telling her, hey, you got a gun to your head. Let the oil flow or we kill you too.
That was very clearly...
we're there for oil.
Yeah.
Alaska has one of the highest reserves of oil that has been untapped because we have laws that don't let us allow to drill in Alaska. Same thing with rare earth minerals. It has the highest concentrations of rare earth minerals that we know of on the planet Earth, but we're not allowed to mine it ourselves. As Americans, we cannot mine our own country. We can have a conversation later about the environment and all other stuff, which, whatever, we'll have that conversation. The United States has a way to be self-sufficient. Like it always has.
Yeah.
And the thing with the Middle East, I think it's always been a quagmire is, and I think you would agree with this, Matt, we don't have compatible cultures. Like, as much as I have love for people of the faith in Islam, I think we have much different theologies. I think that there are parts of the theology that I think make them dangerous. But if you're going to be a person who wants to like find God, God bless you, and I hope you do. But I don't think your culture is compatible with mine. And I think one conversation that we don't have about Israel is, I don't think their culture is compatible with ours either. Not necessarily because of their theology, but because they've been at war for the last 70 years with all of the Middle East. Like, if someone was constantly banging on my window, and then some stranger showed up, my automatic assumption is, who the fuck are you? I'm going to pull a gun and maybe even shoot you with it.
Yeah.
So like, if you've been in that environment for 75 years, I don't blame it on you. I don't think it's all your fault. I blame the Middle East as much as anything else. But if that's the case, you can have that, even if you don't have that conversation, I would disagree with you, but what's an extent? But even if you don't have that conversation, it's like, I don't think any of those cultures are compatible with us. And if that's the case, great. You guys can all glass each other and have fun doing it. But like, until one of you guys are saying you're going to glass me,
for now, though,
I'm staying out of it.
For now, though, we only have the one planet, and if nukes start fucking launching, then it's game over for all of us.
Yeah, I get it, but like, let's be realistic. And I think Israel does this thing too. They do the same thing that Korea does. Korea has nukes, and they've been saying that they hate America for the last 35 years. Have they had the balls to launch anything in any of our directions?
Right.
And Little Rocket Man, I think, is fucking insane. Like, I think he is. I'll give Trump credit for that. There you go, Trump. That's for you. I think he is actually like clinically insane. Like how he's telling his people that he's an actual god on Earth incarnate. Like,
not be when you're brought
he's
up
insane.
in that. Yeah.
He's an insane man with nukes, and we haven't glassed that place yet.
If anyone hasn't yet, go read Dear Leader.
Yeah,
from Michael Malice, because that depicts the North Korean paradigm very well.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so I just don't want anything to do with it, because I don't trust any side. Like, as much as Israel
Right.
has helped us with intelligence. They've also they got their nukes by stealing military secrets from America. There was also the USS Liberty. I don't trust any of them. I want nothing to do with any of them.
The one thing that I always try to remember in instances like this, and I'll admit this is one of the places I think, and I don't even think I have a solid opinion, or like my views will change based on the hour sometimes. But if we were just to come back to America and be like, all right, we're not going to mess with any of these countries. We're all bringing the boys home. Everybody is coming back. It's not like everybody would just say, okay, cool, we're just going to be here. Somebody else would step up. And right now, we are number one in the world. I mean, take it or not, I've written papers, I've done the research, I've published stuff. We are number one. Wherever you are, we can come get you and we can destroy you. We do not want to be number two. If you're not the winner, you're the loser. That is an absolute case here. Yep. Whether some of these things align or don't align with Libertarian Party values doesn't change the fact that they're absolute truths right now. The dollar is the world currency. If it's not the world currency, our economy is going to suck. And the way it doesn't become the world currency is we start trading, which we see China doing now, is when we start seeing the trading of oil in yuan versus dollars. Right. When we stop seeing influence in major areas like the Middle East, Eastern Europe, Africa, South America, to include Venezuela. We say we're there for oil, and I don't know. I haven't gone down all the rabbit holes of whether or not Nicolas Maduro actually was influencing worldwide elections through voting machines. I've seen those rumors going around. I don't know if it's true or not. We know he was propping up Cuba. And we know that trail goes all the way back to Russia. And it's like the second we slip, Russia's just waiting. Whether or not they can handle it, Russia and China are just waiting. And we don't want to be number two.
I will agree with you, Matt. And I think I'm going to upset you a little bit, Dane, and most libertarians with this too. I think Matt brings up a very good point. I think the only caveat I would add to it is I kind of agree with this. With the Matt Walsh sphere of influence argument. I don't like the reasoning behind the Maduro thing, but long story short, if America feels like, and I agree with you, because that we are the global reserve currency, because our entire economic and political system is built around that, so on and so forth, I think if that is the case, and we want to have to be able to keep that currency as a reserve currency, we have to be an empire. You just have to. You can't do that from a non-interventionist status. Is impossible. If you're going to be an empire, though, what I want us to do is not make the same mistake as Rome. I don't want to over-expand. I'm going to have a sphere of influence. That's what I agree with you. I think that is my argument against the Middle East conversation is if we're going to be an empire, we should be the empire of North and South America. Canada is a friend to us right now.
We've already allowed the hordes of Germanians to come into our borders.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree. What I'm saying is, though, if this is the conversation we're going to have eventually, because I agree with Matt, as much as libertarians, we hate this idea, America is an empire and it's not going away anytime soon. And if it did, there's a very good argument to be made that us libertarians would be one of the first people on the chopping block.
That's for sure.
So if we're going to have to be an empire, I want my empire to be focused on the domestic first and foremost. And if you're going to have influence over other nations, it needs to be nations that I think are compatible with us. Most of South America is compatible. They're also mostly Christian nations that go back, so on and so forth, and have colonialism and so on and so forth. Same thing with Central America, same thing with Canada. If you're going to dominate a sphere of the world, let's dominate this part of the world before we start talking about anything else. Because right now, Brazil's not a big friend of ours. Venezuela we know what we're doing there. Cuba, although I think they have zero threat and they're probably going to collapse on their own weight in the next 6 months.
Yeah, there's been riots recently.
They're already on the track, but that's not technically in our possession as an empire yet. if we want to dominate a sphere, let's dominate our sphere first. And once we have that squared away, and once we don't have to worry about 20% of a state budget going to other, and once we have more than 1% being going to things like power in the state, once we get to that place, now we can have a conversation about, all right, do we want to re-enter these other spheres of influence? But I think until you get to that place, what you're going to end up doing is the same mistake that Rome made. And people make this analogy all the time, and they usually make it for the wrong reasons. But one of the biggest issues that Rome had was, first, it was the military became basically mercenary groups from different demographics from around the world. So it was no longer the Roman citizen who was defending Rome. It was a bunch of conscripts from a bunch of different places, which is how the Germans got
They had
into
fealty
Rome.
to the generals, not to Rome.
Not to Rome itself.
Yeah.
And I don't want to end up in that position. And to your point, Dane, because we have let so many people in legally and illegally in the last 10 to 15 years, no matter how much libertarians are going to bitch and moan about the immigration argument, at least some parts of the libertarians, we're in that position. You're right, we're in the Roman position. So if we know what the position we're in, how do we rectify it? And I don't think you could do two things at once. You have to rectify the things internally. You have to expand your influence to this part of the world. And then you can talk about the Middle East or about China. China's not, if we were to dominate South America and North America, China's not coming over here. Like, just because of resources, land mass, because we have a shared ideology, you go ahead and tell a bunch of Catholics in Mexico that they're going to be Buddhist, no disrespecting. But they will tell you in the name of the cross that you will be exorcised from the country. And they will have no problems telling you it. Like, so these are people that we can go ahead. If we want to do empire, we can get empire-y with them and it could work. But we're not compatible with the Middle East. We're probably not even compatible with most of Western Europe anymore because they've lost their way. So like, we need to reinforce our ramparts and make sure they're nice and sturdy and strong before we could talk about expansion again. I wish if we had to do the empire thing, as much as I'd still be against it, at least do empire right. And then go ahead and tell me about how empire is the right thing to do. But if you're doing empire half-assed, then you've lost me altogether.
So, I think the danger we had, so let's go back to the global war on terrorism.
Yeah,
it cost over $1 trillion, well over $1 trillion. But I mean, also how many lives?
I think it was 8. I think the global war on terror has been figured to be 8 trillion.
I'd probably agree with that.
Yeah.
But, the thousands of lives. And this isn't to minimize, I believe it's, 9 U.S. service members that have died in Operation Epic Fury. But let's look right now. There's a war in the Ukraine. There's a war against Iran, Venezuela, and Cuba's about to fall. And we've lost 9 service members. So like I said, I've done some writing on this, and the idea of, I think Patton said, why die for your country when you can make some poor dumb bastard die for his? And it's like, even better if you can make some poor dumb bastard die for yours, as opposed to one of your poor dumb bastards. Right now we have the Ukrainians fighting one of our, biggest threats in the, foes, we'll call it foes as opposed to threats in the country. We have the Israelis, fighting the Iranians. A couple helicopters took down Venezuela, and Cuba's getting ready to implode on itself. These are threats and even just thorns in the side of the United States that it's going to cost us a penny, but bloodshed is going to be limited, assuming that Iran does not escalate any further. We don't actually start putting massive amounts of general purpose forces on the ground. Special forces, okay, but general purpose forces, that could be problematic.
Yeah, that's what we're bad in the deployed. Yeah, but those are fast Marines. These aren't normal. Like, that's very. And I know Matt knows the difference between the two. Like, yes, the Marines. Fast Marines usually have a MARSOC detachment with them too, which is special operations. So like, what we went wrong at it, I don't know if Matt, you feel the same way. What we messed up in the global war on terror is that we try to use traditional military tactics. Like, we try to have these large land masses of artillery and armored cavalry and air cavalry and traditional bigger army, when if you would have focused primarily using your tier 1, tier 2 elements and let them do their job, you could have had a similar, not saying the same, but a similar level of success with a lot less money spent and a lot less lives lost. But a lot, and you know this too, Matt, every general wants to put his stamp of his name on and say, yep, I'm the guy who made Operation Enduring Freedom successful. Here's my name. I want that next star. And that's where we went wrong. But not to go on that tangent, but like, I agree with Matt that so far, yes, the loss of life has not been to a place where it is, put it this way, the reason why this war is still happening is because it's still not unpalatable for the average person in America. Me, Matt, Dane, the three of us might have conversations about the average person. How does even know there's been 9 to 13 members lost?
Yeah, they're just seeing the gas prices.
They're seeing the gas prices. My only concern, I think the biggest concern I have with this, I think he was, I know libertarians hate this name, and to an extent I do too. The CTO for Palantir was just on Sean Ryan's show for his yearly visit, and I agree that the tech that Palantir creates can be used here domestically, and the way it's being used is probably unconstitutional. Yes, and it will be, I agree. But they're still the biggest and probably most innovative contractor there is. And he made a very good point, was that, yeah, we're pulling like THAAD missile systems out of other allied countries and sending them to Israel because we don't have enough. And it's like, yeah, we can do these kinds of excursions when our treasury is full and when our armory is full as well. And it hasn't been, because we've been in Ukraine now for going on 6 years almost, or 5 years. So we've been sending munitions and dollars over there for 5 years. We've been in a 2.5-year conflict in the Middle East, sending weapon systems there because, let's be realistic, Israel doesn't manufacture this stuff. We do. Like, we literally give them money to buy our stuff back from us. So, like, all these munitions are being spent on conflicts that are not happening here on American soil. And to your point, Matt, God forbid, and I pray that this never happens, we do actually have to go into a fully kinetic engagement with a country like a Russia and China. My concern is, one, you have a Gen Z group that is not into this stuff, and you don't have the armory or the treasury to support them correctly. Unless you can guarantee me that the conflict is going to be purely waged via drones and special operations, unless you can guarantee me that, I want nothing to do with it. But I'm just looking at Iran. I'm far more pro-war than the average libertarian.
I mean, just looking at Iran, I think drones are the new way to fight war, and I think that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, but, another couple of years, it'll be robots.
I don't even know if it'll
robotics.
There was a video that I was watching as I was kind of doing research for this that showed an Iranian drone basically flying completely through the U.S. embassy in Baghdad.
That's scary. Yeah, it's scary stuff.
And it's pretty impressive. And so that's something, but I think that's a whole nother conversation that could take us an hour or two.
Yeah. Right. I think, long story short, I think for the most part, we agree that this is something that we need to be monitoring. Like, we can't assume that just because it's been 17 days and it hasn't all gone to hell yet, that there still isn't the possibility. I think that's the point that Joe Kent was trying to make too, I think. And I actually saw a few people, including Tucker, make this point, is that the reason that Joe Kent is leaving and he's doing it publicly is that he feels confident that this is going to escalate more and not de-escalate. And that's my concern, is like, if it's going to escalate more, then what's the next level of escalation? What does that involve? How much money? I hate to say it comes down to money, but when you're $38
trillion a day right now.
And I know people have seen the Facebook post he put out. That's for the amount of money that we're spending. We could have already had a Hyperloop system down the East Coast and so on and so forth and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, I'm sorry, Matt.
Just a caveat, and I haven't been able to confirm. I was looking at this. There are some reports that show Joe Kent lost his security clearance a couple of months ago, and basically has kind of been a fly on the wall for the last few months because
I heard the White House.
I can't confirm any of it. That's what I read.
I saw some murmurings about that too, that like they were concerned that he was the source of some of the leaks that we've seen recently, and that's why he had been taken out of the security briefings in the White House. So I don't know.
I think it's 50-50.
I just always think it's important to provide all the context, so we're not looking at it from a single point of view.
I agree. Yeah, that is a possibility, and I am slightly biased because I have been in the same room with Joe a few times. That father stuff. That
Of course
I know
you have.
personally. Well, no, because he's really that's just a motherfucker. He was really big on like some of like the VA reform stuff with Pete Hegseth leading up to this, like the last run. Like he was going to like VAs a lot. Joe was at Togus. Like he did a whole thing there about how they want to do reforms and stuff. So that's what I mean by being in the same room. Like I've been able to be in like these large things and hear him speak, and knowing his story and knowing some of the guys he served with, which those guys I do know, Dane, is that I think he was, for better or for worse, whether he's doing this for the best reasons or not, I want to give him all the benefit of the doubt. I think he has a honest concern that this is going to escalate, whether that actually has happened or if he's convincing himself of it or so on and so forth. I think this is something that we need to we have to watch, because I think me and Matt will both agree we don't want like 101st Airborne being sent over to Iran tomorrow. Like that happens, I think they'd lose like a lot of people who are even somewhat sympathetic. So like,
yeah,
we just, that's always a possibility, and as long as you don't cross that Rubicon, it makes for very interesting podcast episode.
I think what I'd be more worried about is any general purpose forces being bogged down as a, going back to the FOBs and COPs and everything else of Iraq and Afghanistan. So soldiers going to soldier. That's what they do. They go into places like this, and why I am hopeful and look to Venezuela is the fact that we were in and out within a few hours, and we seem to have found somebody that will be better, and let them run the country. Let them keep the systems in place. When we try to tear down and rebuild like we did in Iraq, I mean, I don't think there was anything really to tear down and rebuild in Afghanistan.
No, there was nothing there.
We tore down and rebuilt in Iraq. And Jason, you talked about it beforehand. This was a kind of a paper I wrote a while back talking about the idea between the ideological warfare versus ethnic warfare. Is you're never gonna, your ideology could be great, you're never gonna win if there's an ethnic difference.
Yeah.
You go to Iraq, I'm not Iraqi, I'm not Muslim, I'm not Middle Eastern, I will never be accepted. I just living here in the state, one of the women that I go to church with, she was like, well, my husband was born in Massachusetts and moved here when he was 6 months old, but he's not a Mainer. He's from Massachusetts. It's the same thing. I could be there with the greatest ideology in Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever. I'm not Iraqi. I'm not Afghanistan. I'm not Afghani, and I never will be. And it doesn't matter.
Yep.
We will always lose that. So
yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a great place to end this. Like we've already had a very long, I think a longer than we intended the conversation, but I think the Iran conversation, once we got into it, was going to do this. Actually, I'm very happy we had this conversation. Matt, thank you so much for the conversation. I think you did a fantastic job.
I wish we would have gotten to more of the clips, but yeah, I think that was good.
Yeah, I think it was good.
Once we upload this, I'll take a look and I'll try to link some of these other clips that we didn't show, so folks can take a look. Some of these things that we kind of wanted to talk about. I think they do a good job at talking about some of the things, and I'll try and link to this Census Bureau file for Maine. I think it's a good talking point where money comes in and money goes out of the state. I think it's a good talking point, and something your average person carry in their pocket. And when they get in those conversations at those barbecues and cookouts and go, no, see, this is where we make money and this is where we lose money. So don't be so upset about that cruise ship.
Right.
What's in that other pile?
Yeah.
Right.
And I will end this Iran conversation with, for those who are listening, especially libertarian members in the state of Maine, please be aware that these are conversations we're trying to have. Not necessarily that these are the opinions of the FPME. Right. Not necessarily this is the conversations of us, but this is the point of these conversations is to go ahead and throw these thoughts against each other and see where we end up. So like even when I'm talking about things like if I'm going to empire this way, Again, not saying that I want an empire, but again, I want to be a realist. And I think this is the one thing that libertarians need to work on. And the one thing we can learn from the right is this lesson of realpolitik. And like, hey, if the world could be a libertarian utopia, then so be it. Fantastic. Let's do it tomorrow. But until that day comes, or until the day Christ comes back, or whatever else you want to say, so that day comes, we have to live in the actual modern, realistic political environment.
Where we
So
are.
need to be able to have conversations about empire and what spheres of influence we want to have versus what not. So not an endorsement, but like these are conversations I think more libertarians need to have realistically, so that way we don't make the same mistake that the left does, and we get bogged down in our ideology to a place where we can't have good arguments and have good rebuttals when we get into these conversations. So thank you both of you guys for that. I appreciate it very much.
And I thank you both as well, and everyone who's stuck with us this long. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Get at us at info@lpme.org if you want to get involved. We're here. We're looking for volunteers. So let's get it.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a good way to end it. Thank you very much, guys, for being on this episode. And for the listener, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode. Well,